Well, Africa will need to develop the capacity to produce COVID-19 vaccines on the continent, and that's according to Africa's CDC Director, Dr. Nkengasong. He went on to say that only 5 African countries appeared to have the capacity to produce the vaccines. Angelo Coppola reports.
Senegal, Tunisia, Morocco, Egypt and South Africa are at different levels of preparedness to produce the vaccines.
So it's investment, building capacity, having technologies, and also the right skill set. Those are all the ingredients that you require to manufacture vaccines on the continent. They're rather scarce on the continent.
The right skills are critical in achieving this, and that includes having a suitable pharmaceutical environment.
So you need to have the universities that can give you the basic skills, but you need to also have a pharmaceutical environment from which you can also attract others.
There are several African pharmaceutical companies that have already had early successes. South African-based Aspen Pharmacare has clinched a deal to produce 300 million doses of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine in its Eastern Cape facility over the next 12 months.
You require significant capability around sterile manufacturing and sterile capability. It's not an easy capability. It's a rather complex one. And as we've seen now with the advent of the pandemic, a much sought after capability around the world.
Another South African operation has also had some success. It started with importing, moved into packaging and labeling, and then formulation. It's announced a transaction with Immunity Bio, a US-based immunotherapy company that plans to move to the next level.
What we're trying to do with Immunity Bio is to plug that gap where BioVac can be able to manufacture from scratch vaccines, the first of which would be a COVID-19 vaccine. So we'll have to build that capacity, and that is the nature of the transaction that we announced.
The continental skills deficit still poses a challenge.
The continent is a net importer of medicines and vaccines. And unless there's a properly implemented coherent strategy to support local manufacture, which there isn't at this point in time across the entirety of the continent, unless you get that right, then it becomes very difficult to establish sustainable manufacturing capacity on the continent.
While the immediate need is to deal with COVID-19 and the pandemic that's spreading throughout the continent, the longer-term view is to find a solution that will allow for local manufacture. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Let's now head over live to Jeffrey Mpatlele. He is the from the African Medical Research Council. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's just begin with giving the priority of the obstacles of medical patients and fears of vaccines nationalism. How can African countries enhance their share of COVID-19 vaccines?
Thanks for having me. I hope you can hear me. So the African countries, there are a number of things that they can do. Obviously, the first thing is that they can take the lead in generating the primary research and research that leads towards product development, so that they are able to take the lead in development of these products. We can talk about vaccines, not just COVID-19, but all kinds of vaccines, diagnostic products, and many other drugs that are needed for treatment of patients. So it's one way to do this, but another way would be to partner with international organizations in doing research, because we know that it's not easy to do this research alone in this DNA age. So partnership is critically important. And the last thing would be that they just have to negotiate the patents and the copyrights of some of these products.
For a while now, we have heard of African leaders being urged that there should be a continental effort in us being able to produce our own vaccines on the continent. What do you think it's going to take for that to become a reality?
It takes commitment and vision. Not just the talk. Obviously, it is important to plan and get the partners involved. But the most important thing is that you need to have commitment and vision. And by commitment, I'm talking about commitment in terms of investing resources in the plan that they talk about. So if they talk, but then they don't invest things like financial resources to ensure that the plan is realized, obviously this will not be realized at the end.
Just speak to us, Jeffrey, about the support that developed nations can extend to the African continent in helping it with with those vaccine shortages. And again, one of the questions that I started with asking you was just about that vaccine nationalism. How do you see that playing out?
It is difficult at this stage because it's playing out when we have a pandemic like COVID-19. But in general, the way this should be done is that there should be a continuous discussions and continuous search for partnerships and collaborations and networking so that you build your own resources, you build your own research base that can lead towards product development. There's no point, as I mentioned, that we only react when we have got a crisis. But during peacetime, we don't take any lead to make sure that we close the gaps. So obviously, what we need from other countries to support the African countries is that when they enter into collaborations, they must remove the obstacles which are actually on the way of many developing countries to really take the lead in research and development. It might be difficult with existing patents that are already in place, but for the future patents, if they are in collaborations, they should allow both African countries and other countries to really manufacture these products, not just developed countries taking the lead in manufacturing their products.
And Jeffrey, that's something really important that you've touched on there, that we're not just talking about what's happening right now with the COVID-19 pandemic, but also future crises. To speak to us about what homegrown industries and medical institutes on the continent can do to prepare for, I mean, we can't know what other diseases could happen in terms of just the extent of what COVID-19 has done. But what else can be done? Because we heard the CDC saying that there are 5 countries on the continent that have the capacity to be able to produce their vaccines. How can that knowledge sharing happen so that we can be prepared or better prepared should another pandemic like this hit?
Maybe let's approach it in a different way. And the question can be, what capacity does exist in Africa? And if you look at, let's take out vaccines as an example, and we look at the capacity of vaccine development in Africa, we are really good in the latter stages of development. In other words, the clinical development of the vaccine. So in terms of preclinical research and development, this is where the gap is. Obviously, if African scientists and countries are able to use the capacity that is already in place to strengthen preclinical research and development, that will really give us more mileage and more muscle in terms of our research and development agenda, so that we don't only rely on products that are developed elsewhere and they are shipped to Africa for clinical testing during clinical trial testing. We are able to develop these products ourselves, and then after developing them, we are able to take them through different stages of testing, be it preclinical testing in laboratory animals or clinical testing in humans. We can do that, but what I'm trying to emphasize on is the fact that we need to make sure that we take the leadership with preclinical development of products.
Jeffrey, thank you so much for all that. Jeffrey Mpahlele, he is from the African Medical Research Council.